Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Fradoff. We're going to go over Chapter 18, Ecology. And I like to start with this image to show us that hopefully we get a better understanding of ecology versus like an ego here, where we think we're just at the top of the food chain and top of the whole, ecosystem and just the universe. And we are really cool. Humans are awesome. We are a very interesting species, but we are just one of many species. And we have to learn our place within our ecosystems and our environments because we are really not treating our environment well, and it's really starting to show. So hopefully we get this more eco kind of mind after this chapter. What is ecology? Ecology is the interactions of organisms and their environments. Obviously, we are one of those organisms, and we're going to be seeing how we interact with, again, our environment. 8.1 is going to be really primarily focused on just ecosystems in general. Biotic factors are living things in an ecosystem, and this includes like once living things, like let's say a dead tree stump. Abiotic factors, these are non-living things such as like sunlight, temperature, precipitation, water, wind, anything like that. That is an abiotic factor. They have never been living. So biotic is living, abiotic is not living. Producers and consumers are also called heterotrophs and autotrophs. Autotrophs and producers produce their own food through chemical processes, while consumers eat other things for food. We are a consumer since we eat other things for food, but producers are a part of the ecosystem where they're kind of the bottom of the ecosystem. I say bottom, but they're kind of like the foundation of an ecosystem. We need producers to have consumers. The three different types of consumers are herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores. Obviously, herbivores eat plant life, omnivores eat both plants and animals, and carnivores only eat consumers. We also have decomposers, which are organisms that break down other things for their nutrients. So they're the kind of the recyclers of the ecosystem. And these are like worms, funguses, fungi, bugs, anything that kind of like decomposes organic matter or waste matter from the ecosystem. Next, in Unit 18.2, we're going to be looking at food chains and food webs. A food chain is one linear sequence of feeding relationships. You can see here the grass is eaten by the grasshopper. The grasshopper then is eaten by the mouse. The mouse is eaten by the owl. That is one food chain. The arrows show the movement of energy, and this is a big misconception that students like tend to draw what eats what. So they want to draw like the owl pointing down to the mouse. But in this case, we're looking at how energy is transferred through the ecosystem. So again, the mouse is going to be eaten by the owl, so the arrow points towards the owl. A food web is all of the food chains of an ecosystem. So you can see here, this ecosystem is showing us all the feeding relationships, where a food chain is just one relationship. So again, food web is many, food chain is one. If we go over like a food web example, we look at each of these food chains. A grasshopper eats stargrass and the red oat grass. So you can see here, we're just going to be filling in the arrows with what eats what. And as we go down the list, we then start to see this food web at the end. All right, 18.3 is going to be about energy transfer. And what we're going to see here is that the sun is going to be the energy for all of the producers. So again, the producers take in sunlight and they capture that sunlight and in things like photosynthesis. The bottom here is the producers, while the top here of this food pyramid, or not the food pyramid, but like the ecosystem pyramid, are the consumers. Each of these levels is known as a trophic level, and that just shows the different positions on this like food chain. Primary consumers are going to eat the producers. Secondary consumers are going to eat the primary consumers. Tertiary consumers are going to eat the secondary consumers, and quaternary consumers are going to eat the tertiary consumers. So as we move out this list, you can see that we're just going to label them differently, like primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. Now, typically, the primary consumers are going to be herbivores, while these middle ones are going to be omnivores, and then these top ones are going to be carnivores. Something that we're also going to go over is the 10% rule. This is where only 10% of the energy from each level makes it to the next. So if there's 1,000,000 joules of sunlight, and that's how we measure energy, and specifically in light, if there's 1,000,000 joules, only 10,000 of those joules, or 10%, is going to makes it to the primary producers. Then we see here the 1,000 joules for the primary consumers, because again, only 10% make it to the next level, and then 100, and then 10. This is just showing that 10% rule, where every different trophic level only gets 10% of the previous amount of energy. All right, our next section is going to be on 18.5. This is going to be about species roles in the environment. So a species role is particularly called a niche or a niche. And this is just kind of how that organism interacts with other organisms in the environment. So you can see like these dung beetles, they have specific adaptations and habitat. They have their different activity patterns. They work with other organisms and they change the physical environment. So they have a lot of factors that they are going to contribute to a environment. So again, this is just looking at how species interact and how they kind of have a role within the environment. Now, for each of these, I'll usually show a video because I think it's really important that we see them in action, but I'm not going to show them here because some of those videos are copyrighted. So, when there's a keystone species, this is a species that exerts a major control over other species in a community. Without that keystone species, the community falls apart. And you can see here, this keystone, this right here, this is actually what Pennsylvania is called, keeps everything together. And without it, the ecosystem is going to fall apart. As you can see in our example, these sea otters are going to eat the sea urchins. Now, the sea urchins eat the kelp of the environment. Now, without the sea otter, which is our keystone species, what happens is the sea urchins are going to grow in population and then they're going to overeat the kelp, which drastically changes the whole just ecosystem. Our next one that we're going to talk about is called invasive species. And these are kind of like the bullies of nature. This is when there is a non-native organism that gets transported to a new environment without us really knowing, and then that environment is going to be drastically changed from this invasive species. Now, there's a lot of different types of invasive species because we're seeing more and more of them because of how humans are transporting them around the world. Our last thing that we're going to talk about is biodiversity. And this is pretty easy for students to understand because, again, it's kind of in the name where bio means life and diversity means just variety. And this is just the diversity of different or the variety of different species in an environment. And what we typically see is more diverse environments are stronger. So you can see here, this diversity here is a lot higher than a lower diversity population or an ecosystem here. What happens is when there are invasive species that try to inhabit a high diversity environment, they do better than low diversity environments would. So these higher diversity environments are much stronger than the lower ones. All right, our last two sections are going to be about ecological organization. This is how just basically we organize just life on Earth. And if you remember, we kind of did this in chapter 1. We talked about how life is organized or how scientists organize different parts of life. And in the ecological sense, we're going to start out here with individual, we're going to move to population, then we're going to go to community, ecosystem, biome, and biosphere. Another name for individual is an organism. So if you don't need to remember that because we've used it so many times before, that's fine. A population is many of the same species living in the same area and same time. So again, one, many. Then if we look at community, it's many different groups of species. Ecosystem is going to add in the abiotic factors. So again, we're just moving up the chain of organization here. We go organism, population, community, ecosystem. So one, many, more than many, adding in abiotic. One thing I like to show this is the meme, biotic and abiotic factors. Yeah, that's where the ecosystem comes into play. But as we get to the later stages here, we're going to see different biomes. And there are many different types of biomes, which are characterized by animal life, plant life, climate, precipitation. You can see the terrestrial biomes here and where they're located. A lot of them are located based on like latitude and longitude specifically. But we also incorporate weather and climate. Weather is just day-to-day conditions, while climate refers to average weather conditions. So big difference there. We should, again, remember this from kind of earlier, maybe in like your middle school science days. Now, like I said before, terrestrial biomes, there are many different types of biomes, and some different books and scientists or companies will kind of categorize these a little bit different or maybe even name them differently. Sometimes I see even like for some of these like boreal forest, just different names, but they're basically the same. You have like tropical forests, savannas, deserts, coniferous forests, deciduous forests, polar ice caps, chaparrals, temperature or temperate grasslands, tundra, and they'll even have the kind of subcategories here. We also have, oh, by the way, the latitude really helps define these different areas. So you can see here what that kind of looks like as we get further away. from the middle of the earth, what that kind of looks like. But we also have different aquatic biomes. And you can see, again, these aquatic biomes are pretty self-explanatory: lakes, rivers, coral reefs, estuaries, intertidal zones, oceans. So there's just different types of aquatic biomes as well. And this is where we're going to wrap up chapter 18.